And I just could not believe my eyes that there was my grandparents' ketubah listed as part of the Israel Museum archives. I was just gobsmacked to find this. So I shared this with everybody the next day. And as I said to Shoshana on Purim, or as Shoshana said to me, it was so fresh, wasn't it? So I really didn't know how to process it for a few days. And then I decided to actually get in touch with the Israel Museum. I wrote them a letter about what had happened and asking for more information. And didn't expect anything back, actually, to be honest. But a week later, I did get a reply from them. This is new to everybody, actually. Nobody knows this. So I did get a reply from them to say that, you know, they were very pleased to hear from me that there was a living descendant of this rabbi and of my grandparents who were married in Gibraltar in 1916. And also that there was some more to the collection that had been donated by this Baroness de Rothschild. So there are two other ketubot from my family, and I've sent Natalie a slide of these two ketubot that I'm going to share with you now.
Do you want me to put them on now, Donna?
Yes, please.
Can you see that?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So there's one. This is okay. Can I have the one before that, please? Oh, sorry. This is 1893, I think. And what's the next one? The date? The next
1888.
Okay, so that's the first one. So these are also members of my family. I was again. I just couldn't believe it. So this is earlier. These were cousins. These would be my great cousins. So this family was called Hajwal, and what they said to me was that if we look, this bride Simcha, daughter of Menahem, son of Joseph. So the name Joseph appears in my family a lot. My dad was Joseph, and of course my son is Joseph. So we can see how back it goes. This is so fascinating for me. So what the museum told me was that there are these two ketubot. There's this ketubah Simcha, daughter of Menahem, who is the rabbi, son of Joseph, married. Who did she marry? The group Solomon Chalfon, son of. That's right. So then. This Salomon, son of Chalfon, there's another ketubah a few years later marrying. If you could go to the next one, please. Next slide. So he's marrying, this groom Solomon is now marrying the bride Yohar or Johar, or I'm not quite sure to pronounce it, daughter of Menahem, son of Joseph Moses Abudaram. So what the museum have said is that it's quite possible that Simcha might have died, and so Solomon married Simcha's sister Yohar a few years later. This was, I mean, Shoshana will confirm that this was the custom when a bride or somebody's wife died. Then the husband married the next slog, which is a bit anathema to us today, but is that correct, Shoshana?
That might have been culturally a custom, but what I don't know about that. But halachically, if a husband were to have died childless, then his brother would have had an obligation to marry his wife, the deceased's wife, and carry on the line. But the other way round, whereby if a woman dies, then he would marry a sister, I think probably would have been a cultural custom rather than any kind of halachically binding thing.
So this is what the museum told me. Thanks for the slides. So this Yohar, oh, that's right. So going back to the groom, Solomon, son of Chalfon, son of Moses Hajwal. So I just want to pick up on that name Hajwal, and I don't need the slides anymore. Thanks very much.
Okay.
So I found some photos actually, because I do remember this name being mentioned in the family, Hajwal, which was changed later on to Hashwell to sound more Spanish, because by then the family will have moved from Tetuan in Morocco to Ceuta, which was Spanish. And I happen to have a descendant of the Hajwal. I'm not sure whether it was Yoha or Simcha. So this, if you can see these photos here, one is dated, this is, I just get so emotional when I see these photos. He is just, I mean, look at him, 1918, and on the back.
Is image of your Joseph?
Well, funnily enough, I thought he looks like Jamie.
Yes, Jamie.
It's Jamie. It's just like.
Oh, I can see Joseph in it.
And there's another one
Jamie.
here. You see, he's
Jamie.
It's Jamie, isn't it? And I didn't want to say anything, but
Definitely Jamie.
Isn't
Definitely
it?
Jamie, yeah.
Jamie, it's just, you can imagine the emotions that these photos have aroused in me. And at the back, the first one of this very dapper one, at the back, it says, to my dear cousins, Menahem and Donna, grandmother, with the kindest regards from her god, Jacob, Hajwal. This would have been, well, this one, I'm not sure. It could have been sent from Tetuan if they were still there, but Gibraltar. So that's all in Spanish. And then this one dated 1920, when he was a bit older. And I think he must have been in the army by then, looking at his uniform, 1920. So I sent the museum all the information they requested. They wanted more information from me, and I sent everything to them. And at the end of my long email with a few attachments, including those to show who I was, plus my birth certificate, I said at the end, I would dearly love to have my grandmother's ketubah back, partly because we had such a great relationship. We're a very close relationship. I lived with her in Hammersmith, and Anne, I'm so glad to see Anne today, because Anne and I go back a very, very long way to Hammersmith and Shepherd's Bush. And she can testify I was there. And
absolutely.
And I said, you know, I'd dearly love to have this ketubah in the family, because there are two Donna Bendelaks, or there were at one point, my grandmother, myself, because Sephardim name while the parent is alive. Living. So and then I waited. And sorry?
No, I'm not talking to you.
Oh, okay. So I received a reply only a couple of days ago from the museum saying something to the effect of the ketubah is part of the museum collection, which is there for the benefit of the public. Remain in the museum for perpetuity. And wait for this, we do not give away artifacts from our collection. Okay, so I wrote back and I said, well, you haven't answered my questions as to how you acquired the ketubah, number one, and number two, whether it's actually on display or whether it's in storage. And I got a reply saying that they've looked into, they're looking into the correspondence of the Baroness. A lot of it is in French. There are hundreds of letters, and they can't guarantee whether they're going to find an answer as to how she acquired the ketubah. So I'm keeping my powder dry on this one, because I object to the fact that they've used the word to give away.
Yeah, it's not really
away. They're not giving something away, they're giving it back.
Returning.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm, you know, keeping my powder dry on this one. I'm waiting. They said they would get back to me next week with an answer as to if they can. They can't guarantee they'll be able to find an answer, but I thought, heavens above, I'm going to have to get some real advice on this. And I'm not sure, finally, just to ask Shoshana, what our rights are to our family ketubot.
I would not want to pretend to have an answer to that. What I would say is that often a ketubah is a form of proof of Jewishness, of Jewish status, and often is something that's required by a Beth Din for perpetuity, just to make decisions about children and grandchildren's Jewish status. So if there's anyone from the generation above you who could make the inquiry or the request in terms of a halachic necessity.
You say above me, sorry, what do you mean?
In the generation, because this is your grandmother's ketubah.
Right.
So no, I mean, I don't think
There
it's
is-
I don't think it's necessary. I think simply by virtue of being her grandchild, just to request it in terms of a halachic necessity to retain. But if there's one of her children who could request it as part
Their
of their
auntie.
heritage, and okay, well then a grandchild also. If there's proof that it is your grandmother's, I would have thought from a halachic point of view that being able to display it, to show it as a proof of well, this is my mother's mother who was
My
married
father's
to
mother.
my father's mother, whatever it is.
Grandmother.
But that's often I would have thought that there's a fairly strong case, but I don't know. I wouldn't want to pass want to say.
So another, just finally, they said also, we're sending you a photograph. We're sending you a photograph of the ketubah, which will allow you to display in your home, but not for public use. What a cheek!
Yeah, what a cheek. It's yours. Surely it's yours. It's yours.
Can you imagine, actually? Can you see it? Donna versus the Israel Museum or versus the Rothschilds. I may lose. I hope I won't lose, but it's like it's a bit like David versus Goliath. But I won't give up until I'll keep on going as as much as I can.
Yeah, this is where Marina will come in handy.
We will keep you posted for episode 3 in the saga.
Lovely, thank you very much, Donna. So we're now going to move on to our Pesach. We'll come back to you, Donna, on your Pesach tales as well later.
I'm just going to go and get my phone because it's on that. Excuse me.
Okay. So, Natalie, are you there now? I know you logged on late.
Oh, sorry. I'm just unmute yourself, Natalie.
Yeah, is that better? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, no, sorry, I just joined a few minutes late here now.
That's okay. So I think you were kindly offered to talk to us a little bit about your Pesach memories. So,
Yeah, I did. Okay. All right, so shall I kick off?
Sure.
Okay, I'll start. Okay, so some of my earliest memories of childhood were actually sitting at a Pesach Seder. My mother was one of 4, and each year her oldest brother, who was my Uncle Phil, would take it upon himself to throw a big Seder for all the family. That was his brothers and sisters and their spouses and all the children. And so I remember sitting at his very long dining room table in Stoke Newington. And the Seder was taken by my grandfather, who would sit at the end of the table, and all the women and the children were completely at the other end. The whole Seder was read in Hebrew. There were no English bits like we do now to make it more accessible. And in those days, there certainly weren't any frogs for the children to play with. I still remember all the songs that they used to sing at the end. And also I remember how my Uncle Phil's wife, my Aunt Maisie, would sit closest to the kitchen, and throughout the Seder she'd still be wearing her apron, so she was always ready to go into the kitchen, and the apron had really big pockets, and when the horseradish came round into the sandwich, it was just too bitter for her to eat, and so she'd pop it in the pockets of her apron. back home for the rest of Pesach, it was really a special time. I think unusually for those days, my mother actually worked full time, but she still changed over everything and cleaned, and she never really baked. She probably didn't have the time. She didn't make Pesach cakes or biscuits, but I still have memories of eating matzah and butter and blackcurrant jam. Once I grew up and lived on my own, I had a shared Pesach with friends, and that was great. But then when I got married, Pesach took on a whole different meaning, because before Mark got married, he would always go away on holiday for Pesach with his friends. So once we were married, I decided that this was a tradition that definitely ought to continue. So it really helped, because we actually got married just before Pesach. So our first Pesach holiday was actually our honeymoon. So over the years, we had some amazing Pesach holidays, and we went to places like America, we went to Canada, Switzerland and Italy. And people often say that, you know, I didn't give Zachary the same childhood memories as I had, which is perfectly true. And he considers Pesach as a time for packing up his suitcase and going to stay for a couple of weeks in a swanky hotel. But anyway, however, for the last couple of years, we haven't really, we haven't been away. We didn't go away the years when Zachary took his exams. We just stayed home, and funny enough, I find that I really quite enjoy hosting Pesach in my own house and preparing it all myself. And I think that the more you do it, the easier it becomes, because you just keep a shopping list from one year to the next and use the same recipes. But I found that the key is actually not even to attempt to get it all ready yourself. I think it has to be, if you're lucky enough to be in a family unit, it has to be a whole family effort, and everyone should just pitch in. So, you know, get people to do things to help change over or cook, and certainly clear up. And I think that doing it together as a whole family makes all the difference.
True. Very good.
Lovely shkoyach.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you.
Very interesting.
So, Sue, what about you? What's your traditions in the Braham family? Sue?
Mute.
Hi. Sorry.
No, okay.
I wasn't actually prepared to speak, but I'll give you some ideas. We married just before Pesach, and I've made Pesach every year since. Even if we went away, where there were 2 years when we went away, as Natalie did, but most years we were at home for at least part of it. And I should think it was the same as everybody else. We also had family to stay some years. Now, when we married, we had traditions on both sides. I have memories from Pesach since I was a child, when we went to stay with my own grandparents one Pesach, which was a delight. And then in other years later on in one's single life, my grandparents came to stay with us, and grandfather took the Seder, or my father took the Seder. Since we've been married, we had, my parents came, they didn't stay with us, I don't think, because my sister lives quite close by, so if we didn't have room, they could stay with her. But hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I can hear all this sort of background noise. We used to stay, we used to have Seder with, my sisters come sometimes with family, and my parents came, my in-laws also came, but both sides of us had different traditions, which caused some trouble sometimes, but we all joined in. I have to say that not my favorite time of the year. I'm glad when we get there, and I invariably fall asleep during the first Seder night.
Oh,
You're so tired from having to rush to do everything before Seder, but then you enjoy the second Seder. I'm not quite sure. This year we ought to be all right because we'll have had Shabbos on Erev Pesach.
Yeah.
And we'll have had to have got everything ready the day before. Pesach was always biscuits and plover cakes, and I've always made. And they're always some left over at the end of Pesach. We have a Haggadah that we've had within in our family that's gone from generation to generation, and the children use it. The children's Haggadah. In fact, I've got one in this room with the movie pictures.
We all have that.
I don't. I've put it here.
That's what we're talking about.
You know what? One moment. One moment. Here we are.
Yeah.
Yes, know that. Yeah, we've all got it or had it.
And most of them were Cheder prizes.
Yes, yes.
We all got them from Cheder one way or the other. We then went on to Roth Haggadahs, but now it's all art scroll. We have Haggadahs from all different sorts of rabbis as well. So there we are. That's mine.
Lovely. Thank you.
Quiet.
And Nina, tell us about your big family seders when you were growing up with all your extra people who attended. You once told me about it. I found it fascinating.
Sorry, who did you ask, Natalie? Because I didn't catch that.
Rena.
Oh, right, sorry. I didn't realise you was asking me. Oh, my goodness, through the years, yes, obviously the first ones I remember are the hostel seders, which were, I mean, up to sort of 50, 60 girls and my father leading the seder. And yes, I had a children's Haggadah, which I passed it on to my girls, and they're very broken now, and the moving pictures have the heads cut off and things like that, but they still use them. And my father made up songs and some of them, in that children's Haggadah, if you look at it, they've simplified some of the language of the English. And I can't remember of Rabbi Akiva. A story is told.
Anina.
Yeah. And my father sort of made up top tunes to these so that everybody could join in. Some of these girls, obviously, English wasn't their first language, and they had to follow it in a simplified form. That's my first recollections of Seder. And my father had made, and I wish I could find it. My father made a Seder, not a Seder plate. He had this 3-tiered wooden construction, and it had little, put them up, and on the top you had all the dishes, and then there were 3 layers, and you put them up in between, and there were little curtains, little gauze curtains on a wire round it. It was 4-sided, and so there were 4 wires with 4 little curtains on them. And my job as a child was to wash and iron those little curtains every year.
Oh, so cute.
I wish I still had that. I don't know what happened to it, because it was something that was absolutely unique. We used that all the way through. After the hostel closed, then we just had family Sedarim with my parents and me and my uncle and aunt and my cousin, and then we had a family who were close friends with 2 boys, and so the 10 of us would get together for Seder. Then came the Jewish Deaf Association, and we had our family Sedarim, but my parents made a 3rd Seder for the deaf people. And that was quite incredible, because my mother organised all the cooking. My father wrote a special Seder for the deaf. We usually got a rabbi in to sort of take it, but it was how my mother did this for 120 people. She made tables. 120. And I remember all the chickens and the food and the organisation, and we drafted. I came in to help. This was even after I was married. We came in to help. My cousin came in to help. My friends I drafted in to help, serve all the stuff. But that was quite incredible. And it's sort of like my whole life has dwindled. Like it started off with this huge seder of, as I said, the girls, the hostel girls, and my father leading it, and then our family sedarim, which carried on. Then afterwards we would share with friends and with family. And last year I was on my own.
Oh,
Lockdown. Couldn't go to anybody, couldn't see anybody. And I had a Seder on my own. A few years before that, when I was with Ashley, we used to go to Israel for Pesach. We used to go and make it a holiday, and I used to go and have it with my daughter in Israel, which was lovely, and, you know, her family and friends and so on. Then last year, of course, at the last minute, I couldn't go, and I was on my own. So I had that was awful. I must say it was the worst experience of my life, having doing a Seder on my own. This year we've got bubbles, so I can be with my daughter and family, so it's not quite so bad. But yeah, that's my recollections, and yeah.
That's lovely. Thank you. Louise, tell us about the Braham family extravaganza aspect.
I'm just trying to think. Our family Sidorim are just very, very ordinary and not very special at all. I mean, I remember when I was a child, we had huge seders. My mother used to make, the family used to come, everybody used to come to our house. And then when we got married, we used to go one night to my parents and one night to Andrew's parents. And then they all used to come to us. And we've made the seders. Andrew and I have made the Sidorim for years and years and years. And we've been to Israel, to Amanda, which is lovely. But we've never been to Robert and Cavalier, because it's always been, Simon and Jordana have been to us, and we just haven't yet been to Golders Green for the Seder. But it won't be this year, but maybe next year. But it's always lovely, and everybody mucks in and we have a good time, and I've got very little to say on it. It's all very pleasant.
Bashana, how about in Golders Green then, please?
Or we'll be in Israel next year, who knows? One or t'other.
Lovely. Lavinia, what about you? Do you have recollections going back to Dublin?
Yeah, I think I remember, you know, years ago, before you had grape juice, you had Kiddush wine.
Yes.
Sure, me and my brother got a bit tipsy. I was thinking about this because, you know, we had to have the wine and we were getting a bit silly in the end of it. So my dad said, better behave yourself, you go to bed or something. But I might have been about 7 or 8, you know, I was quite young. So I remember that. And I also was thinking about the time when, you know, before the Seder and before Pesach, the Bedikas Chometz, when they're looking for the crumbs. And as a teenager, I just told my father, my brother, would you please leave my room? I don't want you in my room. And what are you doing? And I just didn't like it. I didn't like, they'd come in and they'd put it down and then they'd go out and they'd huddle and then they come back in with the candle and they're looking and they're, you know, gathering it. And I just thought the whole thing was so weird. So it really put me off, you know. But children used to do it in Hillel Wolfson. They used to go around with the feather and the duster, or the feather and the candle. And we used to have, do you remember, Donna and Anne, do you remember the Sidorim at the...
Oh, huge Sidorim.
You remember?
Model Sidorim.
They were very nice, I must say. That was very nice. We all
I think because of lockdown, I don't know about everybody else, but big numbers, it's like, did it really happen? Do you know what I mean? Like there were 200 children in the dining room having a model Seder, and how I can't process those numbers at the moment.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just me, but
Well, I think they had different not the whole school together, but just different.
But there was a lot of people in that dining room.
But it was very, I don't think the children, I don't know if the children really thought it was special, but I think as a parent,
Lovely.
thought how they did it, and the PTA have to get all the things ready, and then Rabbi Fine would speak, and
the children would have to dress up in their Shabbos clothes, didn't they, for that day? They did. Yeah, I think so.
But it was very nice. The whole thing was lovely. I mean, we wouldn't have had that in Dublin because we didn't, I didn't go to a Jewish school. So.
And what about you? Have you got any nice memories from your days growing up near Hammersmith?
Well, I didn't grow up in Hammersmith. I actually grew up in Chiswick and then in Ealing. But for me, Pesach is eggs. And dozens and dozens of eggs, and I pile them up in my kitchen, as I'm sure does so many people. Yes, the children's Haggadah with all the rhymes and the poems is cherished, but we do use one that we call the Bris Haggadah, because when Paul was Bris, my husband, he was given a Haggadah. So we have this rather flimsy one now, but he's well into his 60s. So this Haggadah has served us very well from Paul's bris. Obviously, everybody has all their different versions, and I'll never forget a non-Jewish friend once to me. She was invited to a Seder, and she said it's curious because everybody commented on the fact, no, we wash our hands now. No, we're at this part, we're at this bit, and we should be doing this now, because everybody had a different version of the Haggadah. It's always lovely. As a child, I remember going to an aunt and uncle and being aware of different versions of charoset. I mean, my mother always chopped apples by hand. It wasn't a smooth paste for the Seder plate, but the actual balls were solid lumps, almost like mortar, bound together with ground almonds and raisins, and that really was what you would build a pyramid with, I think. We had Spanish dishes that came from my grandmother. Now, Donna will have heard of puello, and I doubt if any of you would have heard of that term. It's a sort of your version of bubulas, maybe mozza fritters, but it's actually made with mozzas that are softened and soaked, water drained off, mixed with eggs, and baked in the oven in oil. And it rises up. Well, it shouldn't rise, but it does. It puffs up because of the egg whites, and then it deflates. And with that for breakfast, I don't really like the Pesach cereals. They're as dry as dust, if you ask me. But the buñuelo, sliced up, reheated with a bit of sugar, lemon, or honey. Wonderful.
Sounds lovely.
And then, Donna, you will have heard of pastel de spinaca, which is making layers, mozza layers, filled with chopped spinach and cheese, more mozza on top, brushed with egg, baked in the oven. Marvellous for packed lunches, I have to say, or Pesach picnics. And in later years, my sister-in-law and I have taken it in turns to host Seder, but one year we went to Paul's relatives in Israel, and I remember seeing the sign for B'nai Barak, because in the Seder, in B'nai Barak, they at Seder dined well, and that just hit me. I mean, that signpost on the roadside, I thought, I'm in B'nai Barak for Seder, and it was amazing. It was one of these big Israeli ones with long tables. They didn't have enough Pesach crockery, but they'd hired everything, so everything matched, which doesn't always happen, you must admit, and we've all got bits and pieces from all over. And that's just a few of my little memories. Thank you.
Wow.
Lovely, thank you very much. Sue Liebman, have you got any memories going up or in recent years with the kids?
Yes, a few things, came to mind. The Hillel Seder, they were quite special. I at those, but yes, they were fun. We were kids. When I grew up, well, we used to have quite a small Seder, so I was always a bit envious of people who had a great big Seder.
You need to speak up a bit, Sue.
Yeah, sorry. We had quite a small Seder with just close grandmothers who came. But my grandmother made some special thing called Hemsel.
Oh yeah.
Thing that fried, and you ate it with prunes. I don't think anybody else probably heard of that.
Oh, I heard of crème.
I don't know. And the other thing was when Anne reminded me of all the different charoset. That was my job to help make the charoset when I was at my parents, and all the different types of charoset. That also rang a bell. But then after we got married, we often went to my cousin and had a bigger Seder, and now it's got smaller again, and have a small Seder. So that's it really. That's my
lovely. That's great. And moving on, Avis, you haven't spoken yet. Can you recollect any recent swim or ones from when you grow up?
Oh, there's Avis.
Yes, I've got quite a few. First of all, it used my maternal grandmother was born on first Seder night, so we always celebrated her birthday at her sister's, and they would have about 20 odd people around the Seder table, and my uncle used to make the wine every year, and it was very good. I can remember that. And the second night my mum hosted it, and she had my dad's family and my mum's and her dad's family, so there would also be about 15 or 16 around the table, and then obviously that dwindled over the years. David's birthday is the last day of Pesach. This year it's actually the 3rd of April is actually his Hebrew birthday as well as his English birthday. And I always make him a chocolate cake, so I've got a fantastic recipe for that. Traditions, not really. I mean, Benny's sometimes he makes his famous potato salad, and he makes a dish with mozza and cheese. So it's a joint Ashkenazi and Sephardi food wise. But this year it'll be a very different Seder, completely different, as was last year's, which I don't yeah. But yeah, it's hard work.
Yeah, it certainly is.
But yeah,
what will David be doing in Israel?
He'll be at number 14 Litchfield Close. He should be coming home on Monday.
Oh, right.
Oh, fantastic.
With the flight has been changed for the umpteenth time, so I've now told him to call me when he gets on the plane to tell me what time the plane might be landing.
So does he then have to stay in quarantine for period?
Yes, yeah. I've got it's as clear as mud, the website, because he's had his double vaccines. He's British. He's had his COVID test, which is obviously negative. So I'm not sure how long he has to quarantine, whether it's 5 or 10 days, but what it'll be will be.
And will he go back to yeshiva afterwards?
Yes.
Oh, well, that'd be nice for you to actually see him.
Yeah.
Oh, lovely.
So that's your Pesach treat for the year.
Yeah, for this year.
Yeah.
And you'll get his chocolate birthday cake.
I was wondering about that actually. I was wondering if it was going to be sent out especially by courier or something.
Oh no. No. Let's put it like this. The last thing we sent out to Israel returned back to us about 3 weeks ago because it was undelivered.
Oh.
It was sent for Rosh Hashanah and we got it just after Purim.
Gosh.
So over to you, Shoshana. I know you have some Sephardi customs you wanted to share.
All right. Okay, so there's a few things I jotted down actually, and when people talk about their experiences, it makes you remember things from your own Seder. So first of all, someone said that that for them it's a little bit of a clash of cultures. So definitely, I think every time there's a marriage, everyone comes with their own customs, and sometimes that's kind of aggravated when people come from different cultural, like totally different cultural backgrounds, not just religious backgrounds. So my family is so already my parents were from very different backgrounds. My mother comes from a Sephardi background, an entrenched Indian, Iraqi with sort of Yemenite and Iranian also branches, but the bulk of their customs are Indian, Iraqi. My father converted into Judaism, but he joined a Chabad community and became religious through Chabad. Now, Sephardi customs, which are, kitniot and soft matzahs that are really more like lafa, versus Chabad, which is like peel everything, and if you can't peel it, don't eat it, and not having gebroks, and that just it was like a real tension between those. So we sort of found a middle ground, and there were the things that we did do and the things that we didn't do. So we didn't eat kitniot, even though the rest of my Jewish family does. We didn't eat soft matzah, even though, again, the rest of my mum's family does eat soft matzahs. And when I say soft matzah, I don't know if anyone's heard of this, but Sephardim have they bake their matzah very differently. So you can actually fold the matzah, which is how the original matzahs were made. They didn't have these cracker matzahs. They had these soft. It's not quite a lafa because it is thicker than that. And if you fold it, it might break a little bit, but it's a lot easier to eat, and you have to eat a lot less to get your kazayats as well. So instead of eating, they always send out this thing of what the measurements of the matzah, you have to eat 1.5 of the square matzahs or 2/3 of the round matzahs during the 9 minutes or whatever it is. So with the Sephardi ones, you have to eat a lot less. Anyway, so there's definitely a clash of cultures. And when I married my husband, Samuel, he also he came with his very Ashkenazi customs, and I came with my very mixed customs. Now, one of the ones that he adopted, one of the customs that he adopted is the charoset, and everyone has their own charoset recipes, but the Sephardi charoset has different ingredients, not just different quantities. So we use a date syrup called halek or silan, and we mix in walnuts and almonds, a mixture of ground walnuts and ground almonds, until it does really become that mortar consistency. But it is delicious. It is like hands down all through Pesach on matzah for dessert, because it's just absolutely amazingly delicious. So the first few years that we were married, so we've actually made Pesach every year, except I think the first year we were married, we went to Israel to spend with my parents. No, actually, I don't think we did. I think that was when we were engaged, because we were engaged over Pesach. We spent that Pesach with my parents. But I think we've made Pesach every single year since we were married. And for the first few years, the rabbi would ask me to, please, can you make my version, my Ashkenazi version of charoset, because it's really important to me, because, it's important to keep up family customs. And for the first few years, like I did. But after that first year, he would just eat my charoset because it's so since then he hasn't looked back, and so after the first couple of years I just haven't even bothered making his version. It's just yucky. Or at least the way that I'm sure everyone else's is delicious, but the way that I made it, not knowing how to make it, it just didn't turn out well, and halek is just delicious. So I think that Pesach to everybody is a very emotive experience, and our memories around Pesach are very, very strong, or tend to be very, very strong. The smells of Pesach, the tastes of Pesach, the Seder night, and it seems that it's like blown out of proportion. But I think if we look at what Pesach represents, then it does kind of make sense that these tend to be the lingering memories, because there's so much that's put into the Pesach experience, to the Seder experience. It doesn't exist in isolation, but there's this entire lead up to it, and there's an entire come down from it. And particularly in Chutz La'aretz, where we repeat the Seder, where we have 2 Sedarim, because of course in Israel we don't, there's only 1 Seder, it's something that's repeated. And I think that the entire reason, the entire point of having a Seder is v'yigadata levincha, is to repeat to the next generation, to continue a story, to continue a national story, whether to your own children, other people's children, or the next generation, or simply to yourselves, even if one is having Seder alone. And Rena, you mentioned Seder all by yourself, you still have the mitzvah of retelling the story. So that's reading it to yourself aloud, if possible, of telling that story. So that story is not something that we just read. It's not something it's easy to just, flip through the pages and read. And so much effort has gone into making these interactive, wonderful. I saw a few people held up exactly the same Haggadah that you've had, the kids one with the rolling one. I didn't have that one. I had Sephardi Haggada's, but we put so much effort into making the whole experience so immersive and so experiential. And that's why all of these customs that we all come with, and all of the foods that we all come with that are like the token Pesach food, they're so important because they all build a wraparound Pesach Seder night experience that kind of adds to our arsenal of repeating that story. So it sets the stage, and that's really what the Seder night is. And Natalie, you started by saying, Sonnenfeld, that is, Natalie, you started by saying that when you grew up, there weren't the frogs, that the kids didn't get frogs, and you said it all in Hebrew. But I think that's something that's so wonderful nowadays, is that we do make it such a wonderful experience for children, and so immersive and experiential, because it's so important, because these are the things that they will be remembering, and that they'll be retelling as well. So I did write down a couple of things. First of all, things that are different. I actually have a glass of wine now, because as we move from Adar, where we drink, to Pesach, to Nissan, where we drink, it seemed really appropriate. So, I've been drinking.
Like any excuse.
I really don't need. I really don't need an excuse for wine, especially on a Mitzvah. So my husband's custom, and I think the prevailing Ashkenazi custom, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, is when you say the 10 plagues, dip your finger in and then wipe it on a napkin. Now, I have to say, the first time that I saw that, I was like, what are you doing? Like, why are you so cheap? You don't want to pour out your wine, because the Sephardi custom is that everyone covers their wine, but just the leader of the Seder, or when I say Sephardi, I'm aware that there are other Sephardi people here. My Sephardi custom, so the Iraqi Indian custom, or the Iraqi custom, is to pour. So the 10 plagues, you pour for each one, and at the end, that wine is cursed wine. So you take that dish and you chuck it out the back door, and God forbid anyone should even sip it, because you've just cursed those, or everything that you've poured out. And everyone else makes sure to cover their wine with their napkin or whatever it is. And if someone didn't cover their wine, it's don't drink the cursed wine. So you don't drink that wine. And the whole dipping it out, maybe because in Ashkenazi circles, they went through famine, and they had to live in ghettos, and compared to I think of the Sephardi Sidorim, and in rich Sephardim sitting in their palace, which it wasn't like that, obviously, but that's just how I thought of it. So that's also something that we do differently. And what else? Oh, the afikoman. So Sephardi. Yeah, definitely, 1,000,000%. The other thing is the afikoman. So I think the prevailing custom in our family, and in all the Sephardi people that we knew, is that rather than hiding the afikoman and then people searching for it, when we broke the matzah, we would tie it in this old scarf thing, tie it onto the youngest person at the Seder, and so the youngest child wore the afikoman, and they would be told, don't lose it and don't let anybody steal it. And then they'd go around the table, and all the kids and whoever wanted to would go around pretending to be slaves. So you break the matzah, and then you launch into the story, and then there's avadim hayinu, so you go around sort of pretending to be the avadim, pretending to be the slaves that were, we were slaves in Egypt, and we're going to schlep our bags of matzah, because we left with the matzah. So the youngest child would wear the afikoman for the duration of the Seder. And in some families, in our family, some years we did this, some years we didn't, there'd be this competition who could steal the afikoman from the youngest child, and the youngest child generally was the first one to fall asleep, so it wasn't so hard to steal it, but then you'd steal it off the person who stole it off them. So it was this whole dealing in stolen goods, until eventually you needed to get the afikoman to actually eat it. So also, I see on Seder plates nowadays that people use a wing. We use the shank bone. I don't know how many people.
Yeah, we use a shank bone.
Yeah, shank
We
bone.
use a wing. We use a wing. Always did.
Yeah, so
Thank
people
you.
use different things. We didn't use a potato dipped in salt water. We used celery leaf dipped in lemon juice. So the celery leaf is quite bitter, and dipped in lemon juice, which also quite bitter. So some of our foods are different. I didn't grow up eating kitniot, but I guess all of my family does eat kitniot, but to varying degrees. People from Morocco, I don't think they eat rice, but they might eat chickpeas. So people sort of give a blanket judgment that all Sephardim eat all kitniot, but it's not actually the case. But my family does.
Two questions for you, Shoshana. Do you tie the afikoman around the kids at your family Seder, and do you go around bashing each other with spring onions?
No, we never did the spring onion thing. No, and in our we don't. I think Yiska generally hides the afikoman. She hides it. We haven't carried on, but I might do it this year. Why not? In terms of size, just two more thoughts. Seder size. So we've been making Pesach since we were married, but sometimes we'd make Pesach but be invited out to my in-laws or something for a Seder. But we were in the rabbinate, I think within about 3 years or so of getting married, and that involved some really big Sedarim. So if we did a shul Seder, that could be 90, 100 people. And if it was a Seder at home with shul members, that could be 35, 40 people. So sometimes we have these massive Seders, but then we also really valued very small Seders. So one of the best Seders in my memory is shul Seder. You're making my connection unstable. We realized we're going to have a very big shul Seder with 90 or 100 people. So we actually made the considered decision to have the first night Seder just us. So myself, the rabbi, and Yiska, who at that point was 3 years old, just turning 3, because she just had her birthday this week. And that's been the best Seder in my memory, are the ones where we're just we print off or we create an entire learning pack with a lot of material to learn through and to take us through the Seder. And that Seder took us to 2 a.m., 3 a.m. And it was, Yiska was there at the beginning, and she had her 4 cups of grape juice, and she, and we went through the story with her. And then by 8:30 or 9 o'clock, she was in bed asleep. And the rest of the time, for 5 hours, we just spoke out, learned out the Haggadah between ourselves, and I found that really beautiful. So when we had the lockdown Sedarim last year, it wasn't the first time that we'd had Seder just us, and we had a format for doing that, which involved creating a lot of material beforehand. So it takes forethought and it takes pre-planning, but it can be a really wonderful bonding experience, and learning experience, and if you have for us children in the home, it can be a really good chinuch or educational experience as well. And finally, the last thing to share is something that my mother says every Pesach. She says, remember that dirt and dust isn't chametz, and the children aren't the korban Pesach. The children aren't the Paschal sacrifice, which basically means, don't lose sight of the important things. When looking for chametz, we're not looking for dirt. We're not looking for dust. We're not looking for, half a sweet that's been under the fridge for 2 years. We're looking for actual pieces of chametz. And it's not worth sacrificing our family's happiness and our children's mental well-being just so that we have a clean house. So I tend to not get too stressed about Pesach cleaning. It's unlikely that there's actual pieces of chametz upstairs in my bedroom or in the kids' bedrooms, because they don't eat upstairs, or in the bathrooms, because other than my glasses of wine that I do take into the bath, it's unlikely that there's pieces of chametz. So I tend to be quite relaxed about the Pesach cleaning, and just that would be my tip, to quote my mum's pearls of wisdom. I hope that ticks the boxes, Natalie.
Thank you.
So I just thought to finish off tonight, I'd slightly changed the tone, reflecting that we're at Rosh Chodesh, and Rosh Chodesh being a special time for women. And so I thought I looked up an article to see if there was any article links about women and Pesach. And I came across a writer called Risha Grona. I don't know if some of you may have heard of her or not, but she's a post-Hasidic writer and the creator of Genesis, which is a particular women's enlightenment and personal growth group. And she has written that the Talmud states that in the merit of righteous women, Israel would redeem from Egypt, and in their merit, the future generations will be redeemed. This is very relevant today. The future is female, states the rallying cry, and nowhere is more evident than in the last 100 years. Female activists have championed social change from the suffragettes to Me Too to Greta Thunberg. And even tonight, as we all sort of sit down and reflect the situation of whether or not it's right for women to be gathering in Clapham Common in memory, it underlines the fact that there is a movement of millions of women who are fighting for change in our personal lives, our schools, our workplaces, our homes, our communities, and our societies. And luckily, as Jewesses, we have some really great role models to follow. A couple of thousand years ago, our ancestors fought for social change during the Egyptian exile. While Moshe is considered the main Pesach character, several women, Risha would argue, got us to the finish line. And I plan to mention 8 biblical trailblazers who all have demonstrated real fortitude. So the first 2 are Shifra and Puah. As anyone who watches Calling a Midwife will know, some midwives can be rather formidable. In Egypt, the Israelite community was swarming. When immigrants start to multiply, some will get scared. What if they rise up against us? And Pharaoh and his advisors believed it was time to curb the Hebrews' enthusiasm and asked the Hebrew midwives Shifra and Puah to assist with accidental post-birth, good old-fashioned infanticide. They weren't having any of it and made some excuses to Pharaoh, and they were rewarded instead of everlasting descendants, illustrating Hashem's measure for measure biblical reward strategy. The second group is Tamar and Esther. And in Egypt, as we know, baby killing was fashionable, and so some Israelites chose to forego sex for a bit to avoid their children being slaughtered. And our feminist lenses can recognise the empowering sacred seduction. But actually, far from being baby producers, babies who seduce their partners to continue our faith are lauded for generations. From Tamar to Esther, Jewish heroines used their womanly wiles to make babies to save our nation and should be applauded for their strength, their strategy, and their vulnerability. And this is also a theme from the survivors of the camps post-World War II, wishing to ensure the continuance of our people. And it was a theme which has been picked up by Rebbetzin Esther Jungereis in her book, The Jewish Soul on Fire. The third reflection is of Yocheved. And as we all know, behind every great man is a powerful woman. How true is that, Shoshana? There's no more powerful patriarch than Moshe, so obviously his mum was pretty special too. She was not only the first of a B'nai Israel to be born in Egypt, she was the magic key to their exit, because by defying the Egyptian authorities and hiding her newborn son in a basket, which she slipped into the Nile River, and allowing her daughter, 5-year-old Miriam, to follow the basket, watching its progress down the river. In essence, Yocheved had faith, vision, and strategy to save her son, in the process saved our nation. Then there's Batia, and Batia was the daughter of Pharaoh, who, as we will recall, fell for finding this baby, this tiny foundling, in the reeds, and brought him home to show him off to her father, who clearly did not have a particular warmth for Jewish kids, but she was managed to convince him that she wanted to keep baby and keep him alive when all others were being slain. And she was a fearless princess who really didn't care what anybody else thought. but she wanted to make sure that she had a son. And despite whatever the Egyptians, priests, astrologers, and her father said, compassion sometimes will succeed over everything else. And then there's obviously Miriam, who first of all we've heard about from the story of the dropping of the baby into the river. But it's not until, again, when we hear of the passing of the Red Sea, that we then hear of Miriam dancing on the side of the edge of the dry land and with the tambourines and playing of the tambourines. And the question is, why, how on earth did she have a tambourine with her? You know, what was it? And the arguments are that actually Miriam had such an insight that she decided to take the tambourines with her because she knew that they couldn't make a noise or assert themselves as Jewish people in Egypt, but they would be able to do so once they were free. And that was a symbolism of why she then started to get the timbals and the tambourines to play when they actually got into the chosen land. And then finally, we talks about Zipporah as a powerful mum and a dynamic sister, that Moshe also needed an uncompromising wife. And Zipporah herself, we know the story of being willing to recognize that there might have been a problem with regard to a bris for Moshe's son. And so the solution was that she took the sharp flintstone and immediately slices off the foreskin, appeasing Hashem and allowing them to progress to Egypt. So who said royals can't be women? That's the question.
That's a really interesting one, Natalie. The Gemara asked that question. It says Timhol Yimhol, I think, that someone who is going to perform a circumcision needs to themselves be circumcised. And it brings as an example, well, hang on, how about Zipporah? How about Moshe's wife, who recognized that there needs to be a circumcision and performs a kosher circumcision? And the response to that is, oh, but women are naturally circumcised. So it's not that women aren't circumcised, it's that they're born with a natural circumcision, which is what is the circumcision is to form a completion, a closeness to Hashem, but that women are born naturally completed in that sense of that closeness, that relationship with Hashem. So yeah, who says a woman can't perform a circumcision after all?
And this, so I think that the traditional recital of the Pesach story every year gives us a chance to reflect. So this year, perhaps we shouldn't forget the ancient women who ensured we could survive for years to come, and some of the modern day Jewish heroines who've continued that tradition. Last month shine. So whether it be Hannah Sanesh, Rosenstein, Ida Nodal, Golda Meir, to name a few. And so why not this year ask some questions around your Seder tables to see what others they contributed to. Perhaps rather than talking about the 4 sons, we could talk about 4 of these inspirational women. Perhaps again, this is a bit too controversial a step to take.
Very good. Oh, lovely cat.
Oh, thank you, Natalie. That was glorious. That was wonderful.
You,
I would say
Natalie.
instead of speaking about the 4 sons, also speak about 4 women who have influenced our history. Absolutely, that's. And the Pesach story is replete with not just females, not just female people, but female imagery. The idea that the Pesach story occurred even because of females, and it says so explicitly and that's why we have Rosh Chodesh. We're getting together here celebrating Rosh Chodesh as women, because Rosh Chodesh is given to women as a reward for their conduct in Mitzrayim, and I think in this week's parsha as well, we just read also about in Ve'akel Pekudei, in what was donated to the Mishkan. One of the items that women specifically donated were those little mirrors, those little copper mirrors, mirrors that we're told were used for the sacred mitzvah of beautifying themselves and flirting with their spouses in order to continue the Jewish line, because husbands simply left their wives, and didn't leave their wives, but were unable to. They didn't have the energy, and they just thought, well, it's better if if the boys are going to be killed, we might as well just not be together at all. But wives recognized the need to perpetuate. So I think we should speak about women. The entire Pesach story is replete with women and female imagery. It's considered the birth canal. The Yetzias Mitzrayim is referred to as the birth canal of the Jewish people. It birthed the Jewish people. So definitely, let's talk about women at the Seder table.
Yes. Lovely. So I'm going to now sort of close shortly. Donna, did you have any 1 or 2 quick things you wanted to say?
Yeah, it's very quick. It's very quick. My memory is of my dad on the first night doing the Haggadah from beginning to end in Hebrew, and on the second night, my mum doing it in Spanish. But I think the loveliest tradition, and I think there are a couple of people in this room who have witnessed this as well, is the Bibilu tradition. I think Avis and Natalie have been to my house on Pesach.
It's lovely, Donna.
So what happens is that the master of the house goes around, I've got some notes here, goes around the table with the Seder plate, chanting. I'm not very good at singing, but it's a chant. It goes, Shoshana, thank you. Bibilu yatsanu mitzrayim. Oh, you know it. Wow. So he goes, and it goes something like this. Bibilu yatsanu mitzrayim. And you go around tapping everybody around the table on the head with the Seder plate. And because I wrote something about this in last year's Pesach newsletter, I looked into the significance, because I didn't know anything about it. I just knew that my dad did it, and we started doing it in my family. But what it means is, Bibilu Yatsanu Min Mitzrayim means, roughly translated, in haste we went out of Egypt. And an interesting take on this ritual is that it's connected to the Kabbalah. It's believed that Rabbi Isaac Luria linked the various items on the Seder plate to the 10 Kabbalistic Sephirot, mystical dimensions, which describe the divine presence, that's the Shekhinah of Hashem. So the Seder plate becomes a sacred symbol of Hashem. In that sense, when raising the Seder plate and tapping everybody on the head with the Seder plate, we are being blessed by the Shekhinah, which accompanies us while we were in exile and now at the Seder table. So basically, it's like it's bringing Hashem into our presence. Bibilu yatsanu mitzrayim. So next time you come to my house for Seder, tin hats at the ready.
Very good.
Can I just ask something, especially to Donna, to Shoshana and to Anne? As you were raised as Sephardi and you've married into Ashkenazi, and I was raised as Ashkenazi and married into Sephardi, do you find the traditions very difficult and complex sometimes, especially at Pesach, because with all different customs?
I just remember that when we were brought up eating peas at Pesach, I can't remember rice, but I do remember eating peas. And when I went to JFS, I came home one day and I said to my mum, Mum, we can't have peas anymore. And she said, oh, all right then. And we never ate peas again. We don't have kitniot anymore. I tell you what I won't have. I will not have eggs in salt water. I can't stand it. So I'm afraid when you come to my house, and I think Natalie and Avis came round, asked me where the salt water was. I said, I'm afraid we don't have them in this.
I didn't ask because I don't do it.
Oh, so Natalie might have missed. So, I think you just have to adapt, basically. You just have to come to some compromise, between you. I don't know about Anne, what you do.
I think I've learned to embrace both sides, really, because there's there's good in both sides. There's plenty that you can take from them. But I'll never forget, but when we were in our early days of marriage, we were going to a Sephardi synagogue, Holland Park, and my husband found the tunes and everything very, very different. To him, it was wailing.
Wailing.
But in the same way, he adapted to the Sephardi, and obviously, I don't know whether for me, I should Portuguese services where we always have the blue book, and the blue book is a little book where all the prayers are in Ladino, and the blue book is referred to through the service, and it's wonderful to me to hear Ladino, and it's dying. I love the tradition of that. But then I had to adapt to the Ashkenazi tunes and customs when we got married. We started at Woodside Park and now we're at Barnet. So I think it's a case of embracing it all, really, because it's all lovely.
I agree, and it's something that we try to teach our children also, is that there's value in everyone's Masorah and everyone's customs, and also just recognizing that these things are not necessarily opposing, that these, it's not halacha to have this specific item on the Seder. I mean, obviously the wine and the matzah, but to have very specific items, and that it's absolutely fine to have different customs, and sometimes we have multiple things on the table. So for a while we had both the charoset and the halek, the Sephardi and the Ashkenazi charoset, and it's you can combine them, and it's about mutual respect. I respect your family's customs, you respect my family's customs. It's okay to have both. It's okay to choose. It's okay to combine, and that's it's respectful. So it's a really good educational point as well.
So in closing, I just want to wish Natalie and Mark a very special happy anniversary. It came up on my luach, so I just wanted to say I hope it's a nice family affair, even if it's Zacharias.
Yeah.
How many years is it, Natalie?
21.
Oh, 21 today.
We'll have to learn how much you can do in lockdown, but we'll have to defer a celebration and do something later on.
Well, maybe it can be extra romantic. How about that?
Okay.
Maybe. And finally, I just wanted to say, Bashana Haba Eversley Road Seder, please God, next year.
Shavuot Tov and Chodesh Tov, everyone. Thank you so much for joining.